They have any police?
Hey,
Don't they have police down there?
I'm retired.
Commission President, we are now live.
Oh, better be quiet.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. Prior to tonight's meeting, we'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Harris, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right.
Dear God, please guide us as we walk through this life. Help us not to act on our own wisdom, but to seek your will in every situation we're in. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, we got to get that fixed.
Ms. Briggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Ms. Twine?
Here.
Mr. Minor?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Mr. Poole?
Here.
What was that?
Commissioners, before you the minutes of our meeting of January 25th, 2021. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the February 8th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Got a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Once again, we're holding this Sandusky City Commission meeting electronically. Commissioners and staff are in attendance in a variety of places with internet hookup. We've asked our audience to either submit their questions or their comments in writing to our commission clerk. We'll answer those that pertain to legislation as that legislation comes before us, as well as provide a response to any other audience questions from the appropriate staff. But I'd also like to acknowledge that those in attendance are doing safe distancing and masks where appropriate. Ms. Briggs, are there any questions from the public that pertain to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mr. President. We have two questions from the public for tonight. The first comes from Sandra Brown at person@buckeyeexpress.com. She writes, to some, neighborhood stabilization equates gentrification. How will the city assure impacted citizens that this rezoning will not displace residents and homeowners and/or alter the character of the neighborhood? The second comes from Sharon Johnson at 1139 5th Street in Sandusky. Pertaining to item 5, she asks, the city is purchasing a used lawnmower for $35,000. The money is coming from Issue 8 Parks and Recreation. Several times the city has used Issue 8 money towards replacing vehicles and equipment. The voters never stipulated equipment and vehicles should be a part of Issue 8 funds. Because Issue 8 is designated money and the general fund is more flexible, Issue 8 is becoming a dumping ground for any obligation that can be transferred from general fund to Issue 8 funds. Taking out notes against Issue 8 money for equipment and vehicles can be risky. If admissions tax revenue does not meet expectations, other categories within the Issue 8 fund can suffer a shortage due to the financial obligation of paying back the notes. The percentage that must go into Issue 8 is permanent. During the budget year, the commissioners and staff determine how of that revenue will go into each category.
Those questions will be addressed as we get to those two pieces of legislation. The first item on our agenda is a presentation from MKSK on the recently released downtown master plan. That plan will be presented by Ms. Erin Blair of MKSK. But prior to that, I'm going to hand this off to Commissioner Murray, who represents the city as the chair of the Planning Commission for his comments. And then I'll ask him to hand it off to MKSK. Commissioner Murray, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And colleagues, public, I'm pleased to be able to report that the Planning Commission met recently in January and unanimously recommended the master plan for what I call the business district. I know it's titled the downtown plan, but I call it the business district. And I want to just move back a little bit to put this in some context. You know, 6 years ago, our community was a little jaundiced at large plans that we paid for and were put on shelves and too often not acted upon. And you know, that was all of our faults. It was everyone from, you know, we made mistakes at the commission level, we made mistakes in the public level, we made mistakes in management, and to a certain extent, there were forces that we couldn't overcome. But look at what has happened to the city after adopting that bicentennial plan, and how far we've come. I think that we have overcome this history of making plans that go nowhere. I think we can now see that after 40 years of simply accepting the fate that was before us, accepting that the trajectory that we were on was one that was inevitable, we now know that we can bend that curve and that we can take control of our own destiny, and we've done exactly that for the last 6 years. I think when we take a look at what we've done with the planning for our parks, what we've done with the planning for the Jackson Street Pier, what we've done with the planning on Shoreline Drive, and so many other parts of the city, we can see the real power of planning. Now, I call this the business district plan that we're going to look at because this is the driver of jobs. This is the driver of our city's tax revenues. And at the same time we have to continue to focus on the Sandusky Neighborhood Initiative. That's incredibly important as well. But these are symbiotic. These two play off against each other and they reinforce each other. We need to have places where people want to live in our neighborhoods. But we also want to have a place that people can relate to, that they can call home, that people come and visit and say, I want to visit again. I want to be a homeowner here. I want to be a resident here. That's important too. So we have to do all these things at the same time, and we all know that we need to attract and retain people in our community. And here's where I think that this is a really special development at a very critical time. I mean, this pandemic has been awful, and so many of you listening know that far more than I do. I'm looking at a police chief, and I'm looking at Lieutenant Green, and I know what your men and women have had to deal with, and so many other in the medical community. Just very difficult things to face, just incredible obstacles, and yet you're doing it. And I think it's our obligation as a commission and a city to say, we're going to keep doing this too. You know, there are a lot of communities that are just hoping to crawl back to something close to normal, maybe later this year, maybe sometime in 2022. But I think we can slingshot this city back into the momentum that we were experiencing just a year ago. I think we can continue to build on the assets and progress that we've all seen together. And I think that this vision allows us to do that. And the plan is, it's that. It is a vision, it is an idea, it is a concept. I've been lucky to work in downtown Sandusky now for almost 34 years. I've been in our present place, our office building, for 27 years. I've watched the change that has occurred in the downtown area with a bird's eye view all this time. I should say a front row seat all this time. People thought that we were crazy to build this office building where there were just dilapidated, literally rat-infested warehouses. Before that, when Citizens Bank, now Civista Bank, built their headquarters 2 blocks away, people thought they were crazy too. But before that, it had been half a century before anybody had built a new building in downtown Sandusky. And look at where we are. Had I had the master plan that we're about to consider back then, had we, my partners, my family and I had that plan, I think we would have made different decisions. We made the best ones we could, but there wasn't a plan at the time. And so that's why I think it's so incredibly important that we have this wonderful plan to share with all the people that are in our communities to give us some guidance in terms of where we might want to go. Every single decision that we're going to make is going to come back in front of this commission or in front of future commissions to vote. and to fund. And we will be able to take a granular level examination of each of those parts and pieces. But for now, I think this is a vision that we should embrace, and I heartily recommend it to all of you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Pongonis of MKSK to further this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Murray, Commissioner Brady. Really happy to be here tonight. Commissioner Murray, you dropped a lot of really important considerations in front of us today, and I just want to make note of a couple things that you said. You described what we've pulled together for you over the past year or so as a plan, a concept, a vision, and I think that's right. It's a roadmap, if you will, for what you all want to do as a community in the near future. It's a tool for you all to gather around and discuss what are the next steps for us to do as we look towards our future as a community. And I think your aspiration and view of that is a really fantastic way to kick us off. I'll keep my comments short here. I want to thank everyone on our steering committees and stakeholders meetings and folks in our steering committee meetings, and recognize Eric and his great staff for helping us and pushing us to better and better solutions over the course of the project here for you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron Blair to present the Downtown Sandusky Master Plan, and look forward to your comments and thoughts. And thanks again for inviting us into your community. We had a great time with you all.
Thanks so much, Jeff and Commissioner Murray, for introducing us, Commissioner President Brady, and fellow commissioners. Is everyone hearing me okay?
Good, coming in good.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here and see if you can, if you're seeing the plan diagram of your downtown. Is that everybody seeing the screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, I'm Erin Blair. I'm a planner with MKSK. Also been pleased to serve as the project manager for this project. It's been really great to work with you all, as Jeff mentioned. You've had some time to go over the full document, so this evening we're going to focus on the highlights. So I'm going to focus mostly on the recommendations and the focus areas portions of the plan. But first, I want to start off and really talk about this plan was shaped by the community. So we had 798 community members respond to a robust community survey about the future of downtown. We had this poster pointed at the Jackson Street Pier to get some interest to it. We had dozens of stakeholders and 2 rounds of interviews and a regular steering committee, as Jeff mentioned, as well as the great insights and expertise of staff. And you'll see what we heard directly reflected in the plan recommendations, which is a celebration of the work you've already accomplished. People are so excited about it, and emphasis on the waterfront as the city's greatest asset, really why it's located where you are, guidance for year-round activities and events, support for a transformative vision for Columbus Avenue, and emphasis on downtown as a neighborhood with increased housing options, employment, local business, and great public spaces. So the plan has 9 high-level recommendations, and each of those contain a series of action steps. A number of them lay out principles for development, which are then illustrated in the focus areas. And there are 5 focus areas. So those really concentrate on places that are ripe for market-driven and catalytic development. They were devised in concentration with plans you've already completed with our partners HR&A, who are economic development specialists, and we'll discuss why Columbus Avenue and Jackson Street parking lot are really 2 priorities for implementation in the focus areas. We'll go through each of those. So I want to jump right into the recommendation, and just a reminder for anyone who is seeing this, the full plan document has a really robust and thorough analysis of the built environment of the city and market study summaries to show the market support for the recommendations and the focus areas. So the first recommendation is to position downtown Sandusky as the economic, entertainment, and cultural anchor of the region. So we heard over and over that the waterfront is the city's greatest asset. And the action steps that are within this recommendation describe how to continue to increase access and leverage the waterfront as an amenity for all of Sandusky's residents. The second recommendation is to brand something new. So this recommendation talks about being able to create a waterfront district identity. So you've done a lot of the work that you've done recently, especially you're creating these great places that are downtown that are on the water. So Jackson Street Pier, Shoreline Drive, plus the State Theater, the Jet Express adds so much activity and vibrancy, and other businesses and events that are going to take place right around there. So this idea is the action steps here are outlining a way to brand an identity for that collection of waterfront locations, and that can be a marketing story and an economic development opportunity for the area as a place that's a distinct place within downtown. The third piece is talking about programming. So how to continue and broaden programming downtown for year-round events and activities. The words events and activities, they were a top theme from what we heard in the resident survey, and people will be really excited to see offerings for things to do and things to see year-round downtown. Patio season is longer than you think. We did a little graph chart of the weather conditions. Apparently, according to Eric, there's 2 weeks in October that are better than anywhere else in the country. So I'll have to come up and sit on a patio then. But you'll see some examples in the focus areas for how to increase public and private outdoor spaces for the community. Next, we focus on walkability. So people love to live downtown and visit downtown because it's walkable. And this recommendation discusses how the built environment affects connectivity and safety. So the first set of guidelines, we have travel widths and travel lanes and tree zone and things. It's the kit of parts, is the relationship of the buildings to the street, the sidewalk widths, tree lawns, parking, travel lanes. Those all add up to create a comfortable and inviting pedestrian experience. There's a second piece to this because we need guidance for intersection treatments as well. So there's a focus on high visibility crossings throughout downtown. We're all pedestrians at some point, and we need to make sure that people of all ages and abilities are safe when they get from one destination to the next. So the high visibility crosswalks also have a layer of public art or identity element to them as well to really tie that identity together downtown. And this really rolls right into a broader vision for downtown transportation, which is a multimodal culture of getting from place to place. So whether you're a resident who takes your golf cart to dinner, or a marina member who wants to leave your car in the parking lot and grab a bicycle to ride down to the pier and watch the sunset, the recommendations here are discussing those kind of examples and more, including increasing visibility of the parking garage, expanding transit, and attracting vendors who will contribute to the transportation options downtown. So we talked a little bit with the waterfront identity about how it's places that start to add up to make an identity of a district. And you have a fantastic new anchor with the resort school, the collaboration with BGSU and Cedar Fair, and that is going to be a catalyst, and it's just east of Columbus Avenue. So this recommendation talks about how to really leverage that new building as an anchor and supporting future land uses that are going to help the students and this part of downtown thrive. We've talked about incubator spaces for entrepreneurs or maker spaces, other higher education programs. So elements like that really help this become a district in itself, and supporting retail that are going to do well there. So number 7 and number 8 work hand in hand. These recommendations revitalize with activated high quality buildings and create amazing public spaces. They lay out principles for infill development and redevelopment that you'll see illustrated in the focus areas. So everything from balconies and rooftops to capture more water views, to public art that adds interest and experiences at the street level. So we'll kind of fly past those because you really see them illustrated in the focus areas. And this all gets us to the final recommendation is to prioritize development, prioritize investment. And this lays out the 5 focus areas, which we'll go through one by one. So I want to pause here for a second, and we talked about this a little bit up front with Commissioner Murray's comments and Jeff as well, that we are showing concept illustrations for each of these focus areas. So we are drawing program and scale and, showing what fits in what place and really the types of uses that are going to do really well in the focus areas. But this is still master plan level. It's high level guidance. So any major improvement or investment would warrant more public engagement and planning and also come back to you for review. So the first one is to make Columbus Avenue downtown's most vibrant street. And you can see in the diagram, you've got this great anchor of Washington Park and this great anchor of the water. And Columbus Avenue is kind of the missing link. You have all these uses, this new city hall and commercial uses there. And it really is the missing link between the improvements you've made on Shoreline Drive and Jackson Street Pier with the park. So it really makes it the next logical step for a public investment. The concepts on Columbus Avenue is a transformative concept to think about the street as a festival street and a linear park experience. So it maximizes 2 areas that are most important to the community. What we heard overall within Walkability and when we asked about Columbus Avenue was people want to see wider sidewalks and more room for outdoor dining. So this concept really maximizes the space you have in the public realm, and it also adds the flexibility to close the street down to hold a festival or special events, but make sure that the street is also serving businesses and the day-to-day needs of all the users in the site. So following Columbus Avenue down to the water, we get to Shade Mylender Plaza. And we know this is an important space in the city. It's a critical connector. Where's my cat is playing with my, excuse me. Oh, pets. So we know that Shade Mylender Plaza is a critical connector between Jackson Street Pier, Shoreline Drive, and Columbus Avenue. The concepts that we have in the plan for Shade Mylender Plaza outline a phased approach. So the first piece is talking about enhanced plantings. That is a short-term investment, will add some shade and freshen up the space. The second piece shows an interactive fountain, which could add some fun and bring in more families to play in the space day to day. But it would also allow you to drain it for special events to create a small gathering space in the center of the plaza as it is. The long-term concept, which was preferred in our stakeholder interviews, it really showcases the amount of space you have available. So kind of taking all the way from building edge to building edge and maximizing the amount of plaza you can really have in that land area. The hardscape, as Shade Mylender is today, the hardscape will eventually need some major investment just due to normal wear and tear. So that might be the point where it's time to talk with the community about an idea for the future of the space. So the illustration here, it showcases a Broaden plaza that really unites Columbus Avenue with Shoreline Drive, and it matches the quality and materials and kind of artistic elements on either side of it. So again, this is conceptual illustration. It's a starting point for a longer term conversation, and it's one we think will come up as you're approaching a Columbus Avenue design process. So these illustrations are really here to help you facilitate that conversation. The next, we get to the Beckling Building. I just love this piece of architecture. We're so excited we got to explore ideas for it in the plan. And because of its location, it has just a fantastic opportunity to be a connector between all these great waterfront amenities that you have downtown. The concept itself, it illustrates a marketplace-like experience on the first floor, so a place where multiple businesses are operating, and that can be from makers and retail to walk-up dining to a full-service restaurant. And of course, we're showing 2 huge patios on either side, tons of people watching, outdoor dining experience, which the community really will be excited about. And the second floor of the building is imagined as a series of small offices. So those are potentially connected to the first floor businesses, or they could be in other independent operators that enliven the space and provide built-in customers for the ground floor vendors. And while we're here, I wanted to point out the Water's Edge platform, because you've seen that in a couple of the illustrations. And that's an idea that originated in the bicentennial plan, and it really would expand access to the water views and the people watching and sunset watching there, plus add another flexible gathering space for you at this location. And that itself could be completed as an independent project, or it could be part of a larger design process. Next is the redevelopment of the Jackson Street parking lot. So this is a key development block in the city. We know downtown is missing hotel rooms, and according to our economic development specialist project partners, HRNA, as well as the stakeholders we talked to, the development community here, we think this is the prime location for it. So this concept takes an underutilized city asset, what you have today is the parking lot, and it leverages that to really an incredible asset for the community. A hotel here will bring those visitors right into the center of downtown, right in the center of your commerce, right in in your business district. And it also includes an event center, which could be on a higher floor to give you the views of the water, connected to the theater. And we did coordinate with them on their renovation concepts to make sure that this illustration could really work with what they're planning. So the concept is showing a 150-room hotel fronting Water Street. That's this edge, and then a mixed-use anchor development along Market Street on this edge. So this could be an anchor office use, retail on the ground floor. You have a wonderful retail corridor emerging along Market Street. So those could really work together. And it's also showing some strong connectivity with an extension of Peddler's Alley, and you can see that on this kind of above ground view. Extending Peddler's Alley all the way through to really give you some really interesting pedestrian spaces and make sure that there's a lot of connectivity through and around this development. We're also showing a readapted warehouse building on the corner here. So it's the building there today is typical of many warehouse buildings that you have on the west side of downtown. And the illustration is a representation of the type of private investment and improvements that could spur off of an injection of economic activity this redevelopment would bring to downtown. The next focus area is a discussion of downtown as a vibrant neighborhood. And this really applies to the east portion of the waterfront, frontage neighborhood of downtown and west of the downtown core as well. We're using the east side to illustrate it, but it's more of like a future land use guidance kind of diagram. And you're going to continue to see investment in redevelopment in the core of downtown along the waterfront, and especially on this side in areas like Battery Park. These guidelines are talking about how infill residential uses can be positioned within downtown neighborhoods. And the principles are talking about protecting the water views from the corridors, making sure that you have a variety of housing types and price points. And we want to see residential development be able to meet the demand for downtown living. We want it to continue to be a walkable neighborhood and have that interest that you have today and blend into the neighborhood fabric as well. The final focus area is Battery Park, and this concept emphasizes a balanced mix of uses and neighborhood character, interaction with the waterfront, connectivity to the neighborhoods. So we're showing that you're using the street grid and the public spaces, the access to the water, as your kind of central framework and guidance for what the site plan should do when you see development proposals come across your desk for this site. And we also included the draft vision that was done in 2017, so you have that as reference too, and both of those have some similar guidelines as far as the public spaces, the connectivity, and the emphasis on the waterfront. And the final piece I'll share tonight is just a note on the implementation section. So you'll notice there's a number of tools, including kind of a tracking matrix for staff from all the recommendations that are in the plan. But the first spread itself talks about the top 10 policy and programming priorities and the top 10 priority projects. These were prioritized based on items that you've already got in motion. So some of the great work you're already doing, some of the private investment that's already happening downtown, like the Fike Building renovation, for example, and items that are important to the community and items that are catalytic to the continued revitalization of downtown. So that's how the prioritization worked for the implementation section. So again, that was a super high level view of the plan itself, but we didn't want to take you, through the whole 100-page document. But I want to thank you again for your support of the project and your dedication and service as commissioners to the city of Sandusky. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Commissioners, comments or questions for Aaron or for Jeff are appropriate at this point?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Twine.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate attaching the document to our information for the meeting tonight. I did get a chance to read through most of it, but your presentation tonight kind of zeroed in on some of the key points. I do want to ask a question about the survey. Actually, on page 16, and what I'm in particular interested in is that there are 90% white that responded and about 2% African American. And there's a paragraph in there describing that that you guys will be trying to target more minorities. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're going to do that?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Twine, that job is really going to fall on to the city staff and to the city commission in the implementation of this plan. And it is something that we've already begun a lot of dialogues. Actually, we had a phone call just the other day with Commissioner Harris and a few individuals about how we better engage with the Black community, not just about downtown, but about everything that we do at the city. And so it is a cultural shift that we are looking at in how we fill vacant positions at the city and how we do outreach for the downtown plan and for everything that we do. And we know that we have ground to cover. I know that Commission President Brady, helped earlier this year in the city commission, greatly supported that shift towards making sure that the boards and commission appointments we have. And so to me, it is something that has proven true in many of the community dialogues that I've been a part of, both in Sandusky and previously to coming to Sandusky. But it's not something that you fix in one survey, or it's not something that you fix in one plan. It's something that you fix from the ground up by providing meaningful engagement and meaningful leadership opportunities, again, from inside the staff to on the city commission and in every process. And so it won't be easy, but it's something that I can assure you we're committed to, and that will, I hope that you'll see very visible signs of that commitment immediately, and that you hold us accountable for providing it going forward.
Thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Commissioner Twine, I would just like to piggyback off of Mr. Wipfler's comments, and that is that I don't believe that this commission intends to pay lip service to that obligation. I was pleased when I read the report. I was pleased when I got to page 16 and found out that they were bold enough to say that they had fallen short, or that we have fallen short as engaging the Black community on this. We as a commission must not allow that to happen. It is each one of our responsibilities to re-engage and to make that a priority prior to spending dollars in this community on something as important to the entire community. So I think that's an obligation that staff now hears, that MKSK certainly heard, and that it's up to us as a commission to hold each individual's feet to the fire to make sure that engagement is meaningful and not just lip service.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Commissioner Wadding.
I read this twice. I had hard copies of it. I watched the Planning Commission meeting and the presentation tonight. It looks exciting. My biggest concern, and I've conveyed that to some of the other commissioners, is the Shade Mylander Plaza. That's part of our history of downtown Sandusky, And I know there's an endowment, money set aside for repairs and upkeep. I would just like that part, and I'm just one of 7, and I don't want to have this affect my vote either way, because I support the plan, but the Shade Mylander Park area or Plaza area, I think we need to go through that with gloves on and make sure not to change that too much. I know on my copy on page 79, it says, this area should excite all of our senses. Well, it excited mine on Saturday morning when I read this again. I kept thinking, do I want to change or alter that? Mr. Mylander was a pillar of this community, and I just think the park's nice. There's been a lot of events there, and I know it's not going to happen tomorrow, but if it happens in 2 or 3 years, that would kind of bother me long term. Thank you.
Commissioner Twine, I want to return to you. I think I may have cut you off. That's the trouble with this virtual distancing. Sometimes there's a delay, but I think you may have a follow-up point on your issue.
Yeah, I had a follow-up comment. I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Brady, as well as Mr. Woopser's comments. And I don't want this to just, be lip service. I do believe that it is very important that the minority community be involved in this process. And yes, there is a long way to go. Personally, I think it's a great idea, great plan. I know there was a lot of work put into this, but I still want to make sure that the minority community is involved and included in this process as we move forward. And frankly, I know it's difficult. I read that this was an online survey, so that might be one of the challenges, is that, a lot of people in the minority community don't have access to online type surveys, so it might be another an opportunity to do some one-on-one, some targeted surveys going into the Black community gatherings at churches or communities that, that we can gather a bunch of people together to discuss this process. So again, on a personal level, I think it's a great idea, a great plan, and I know that there was a lot of work put into it, but moving forward, I want to make sure that we don't disregard certain elements of our community. Thank you.
Commissioner President, if I could just briefly build on something inspired by Commissioner Twine's statement. Two specific things that we've already begun that I think will help us to accomplish some of those goals is, one, I have had active conversations with Recreation Superintendent Jason Whirling, as well as Annette and Tondra Frisbee in particular. And one of the things that we want to do with the Mylander Pavilion is move as much of our city's own recreation programming as possible to that facility as quickly as possible, so that we can start with Sandusky youth and getting them to realize from a young age that this is their downtown. And that is one of the things that I've realized, is that there is a sense that we discovered, not only in this planning process, but historically, as we've done outreach, that the sense that the downtown isn't for us is something that I've heard from members of the minority community. And that's something you break down one business at a time, but it's something that we can very intentionally do by hosting more city programming downtown. And then secondarily, with the type of, as Aaron mentioned in the plan, there is a real commitment to doing more program. We have to make sure that when we schedule that programming and we set what type of programming we're going to bring to the community, that it is programming that will appeal to the broadest and most diverse of Sandusky's audiences. And that's something that we're steadfastly committed to. And then the last thing I'll say, and I know Commissioner Harris has been an active part of this, is we have been part of a process of working with minority businesses, generally on a citywide basis. But I think that the more we can do is we do small business assistance to make sure that small business assistance is helping to grow minority businesses and making them feel comfortable that a great location for their business is in downtown. And we did have members, whether it was Bridget Sanders with Lena Brow or Spencer from Fancy Me Boutique, that they were engaged in this process. But I think, creating a culture of entrepreneurship with more minority businesses downtown, and then really tailoring the city's programming and the outside programming that we bring in to be reflective of the diversity of the community will help us to create a culture that will break down some of those barriers over time.
Additional comments, questions for the presenter?
Mr. Chairman, Quick,
Commissioner Wanacke.
yeah, I got a quick follow-up for city manager. On page 96, the funding, the real estate funding, it says considering the creation of a new section 41 TIF program downtown. What exactly does that mean?
So we know that anytime downtown projects have come up, that there's always a sense of, are we over-investing in downtown, and is that going to take away, through the commission president to Commissioner Rogers, and I apologize, is that going to take away from the resources that we use to provide critical services, whether those are safety services or code enforcement services or our housing grant programs or the infrastructure investments that we make in the city streets and parks scattered throughout the city. And so we have taken on, both previous to the passage of this downtown plan, but also in the implementation of the plan, is to make sure that the public investments that come out of it are coming from the resources that are generated from downtown projects. And so the Section 41 is one tool among a few. And as Commission Vice President Murray has mentioned at points in the past, is the way that TIFs work is these can only be spent in the vicinity where the taxes are generated. And we've had a great partnership with Sandusky City Schools of using these in a measured approach, but in a way that can help us to continue to move projects forward. And so, for example, Columbus Avenue is slated to be one of the first projects that we want to look at redoing. When we redo Columbus Avenue, the cost of that project that the city's general fund would be responsible for will come from tax increment financing that is already in place and exists for the Bowling Green project, the Marketplace at Cook, the Schmidt apartment redevelopment, the Fike building, the Cook building, and then the City Hall project are all part of an existing TIF. And then we have Section 41 TIFs, which can be layered onto those on future downtown projects, so that any funding that goes into those projects are coming from sources other than the general fund sources that we have used and will continue to use to support the services and the growth of Sandusky's neighborhoods. So it's really a statement that is just like the Jackson Street Pier and Shoreline Drive were made possible by tax increment financing the Chesapeake Lofts. It is the tax increment financing on the most recent wave of downtown development that will support our continued investment in the public realm of downtown Sandusky.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman? No.
Commissioner Poole?
Go ahead, Mr. Poole.
Yeah, I just want to double back to what Commissioner Twine indicated. I want to point out to you that we now have a document before us that you're asking us to approve that we recognizably did not contact enough diversity in people's opinions about this. And I just want to point out it's very nice, and I appreciate all the after the fact asking for forgiveness. We're going to take care of this in the future. But I'd like to point out that African Americans didn't just move here last week. So when you sat down and met with these stakeholders, along with what you got from online, and we're not enough African Americans on there, or probably folks from many neighborhoods, that was the time that you were supposed to say, this isn't enough, we need enough information. We don't have enough people on this. So the concept of apologizing later, I'm not buying it. These folks have lived here all this time, had any opportunity before you came to this and finalized it to get more information. And that's what I wanted to say about that. My question would be for the young lady giving this. Columbus Ave is Mr. Whoopster indicated that Columbus Ave was the first thing that we wanted to look at. I'm not opposed to looking at it. I'm not sure that we have had enough input from downtown businessmen, because the talk on the street from various business people down there is they're somewhat skeptical about this. And so the concept of approving this, I'm not sure whether I'm going to vote for it or not because I object to what's being offered, but I don't want to get in a position where, oh, you guys already approved this. The next thing we know, it's steamrolled through without thorough discussion on each and every one of these things that you put in here. So that's about Columbus Ave. Miss, I would ask, in your 150-room hotel, what's the occupancy rate the hotels we have now.
Okay,
What
through the
I'm asking is
commission,
for 100, yeah, go ahead.
through the chair to Commissioner Poole. Couple of things. So you asked about the occupancy rate. I'm going to have to look that up. I do believe it's pretty high, and the market studies. Oh, Eric said he maybe follow up there. The market studies showed a strong demand for a downtown hotel, which doesn't currently exist. All the rooms that you have now are in a much different condition on the edges of town, kind of more Cedar Point focused. So there's just one small point there. And as far as the Columbus Avenue process from high level, we talked to the business owners that are along the corridor, primarily considered. They were happy to hear that more to get more patio space. Excuse me, thank you. And we reached out to multiple times to make sure that we got people in the conversation to view those concepts before we put them in the plan, and did make changes based on their feedback. Also, again, it's a very high level, so you have lots of opportunity to continue community engagement with Columbus Avenue, especially a process like this would be really important moving forward.
And if I could,
Okay.
through the commission president to Commissioner Poole, the market study that was conducted for this site showed that within 4 years it would be over 60% occupancy on a year-round basis, which is very high. It recommended somewhere between 120 and 150 rooms for this market. It is comparable to exactly where occupancy is at hotels in the surrounding region, with the caveat, though, that they believed that this hotel could differentiate itself within the market because many of those other hotels are located along similar corridors. No hotel of scale is located in the downtown. So, and we've actually had several hotel operators reach out since the plan was announced, saying that they'd like to look at the potential of this site in addition to those that had been talked to before. So we feel good about that. And I think Aaron nailed it with Columbus Avenue. Many people were engaged about Columbus, but the great news is, as we stated, this is a broad level plan. And just like we identified the Jackson Street Pier and Shoreline Drive projects as part of the Bicentennial Vision Plan, the very next step that we took after the adoption of those plans was to do a conceptual planning process that took incredible amounts of public feedback into place before any final decisions were made. And that's exactly really what we vision for Columbus, is that there's going to be a robust public process in which everyone's going to get to give their 2 cents, and we can decide together. And the commission will decide ultimately with that feedback what project they'd like to go forward with on that important street.
Commissioner Meinzer, I think you had a question.
Oh, I just had a comment, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I'm going to go back to the 70s again. And back then when we were planning for fire protection, and we used to coin this area the high value district. And in the several decades that followed, or the few decades that followed, it had severely devalued. I plan to vote on this tonight, mainly to give the staff direction to continue to work on eliminating blight and trying to increase the property values down there in the business district, as Mr. Murray called it. I think the timeline might be a little aggressive. As long as this work, the staff can handle the work, or continuing to work on this, along with finishing the neighborhood initiatives that we have in the master plan or the bicentennial plan, and we are disciplined with our debt service, I think this can we can make some great strides in bringing some commerce and maybe attracting the 10,000 people that we lost over those decades. So
Additional questions, Commissioner? No additional questions. I want to thank both Aaron and Jeff for the presentation tonight and for delivering this product to us. It gives us some exciting ideas. It gives us some things to work towards and certainly to dream for. Thanks for your hard work, both Jeff and Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
And as we do with most guests early on in the program, I want to assure you that you do not have to hang around online for the rest of this meeting. You will find the rest of it rather boring, I'm sure, so you can clock out. Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various legislation. Can I have a motion to accept these communications?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 6 items on our consent agenda this evening. Do any of you wish to move any of these items to the regular agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meinzer.
I'd like to move B, the zoning request, to the regular agenda.
Item B will be moved to the regular agenda. Any other items, Commissioners, to move to the regular agenda? Ms. Briggs, will you present the consent agenda?
Of course, Mr. Brady. The consent agenda should be up on your screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. Item A is a payment to Lexipol LLC for annual subscription fee for the Sandusky Police Department, and it is the second reading. Skipping item B. Item C is a permission to submit a grant to ODNR for the Shelby Street Boat Launch Facilities upgrade. Item D is a permission to issue an RFP for one parcel in the land bank program. Item E is the second and final change order for Shoreline Drive Rehabilitation Project, and it is a deduct. And item F is a new liquor permit for Jim's Pizza Box, Sandusky.
Having heard these ordinances and resolutions, Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Twine.
I move to accept the consent agenda items A, C, D, E, and F, and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Now on the ordinances, resolutions, and liquor permit.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Those ordinances, resolutions, and liquor permits are passed. We'll now turn to our regular agenda. Ms. Briggs, we present formerly item B will now become item number 1.
Yes, Mr. President. Item number 1 is an ordinance amending the official zone map of the City of Sandusky to rezone parcels on the south side of First Street, east of Farwell Street, and parcels on the north side of Second Street, east of Wildman Drive, from R140 Single Family Residential District to CR Commercial Recreation District.
Commissioner says this is a second reading of this ordinance. It does not require a motion, so we will move directly to the discussion phase of this ordinance. So I open the floor up for discussion on this piece of legislation.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meinzer.
I wanted to move it onto the agenda so we could have this discussion. I think I misunderstood when this was first presented. We had 2 different applicants that requested the zoning change, and the city presented a third. And with the planned unit development across the street from these units is going to be multi-millions of dollars. It's going to be a very nice structure. And I think the applicant to the west of Farwell has some plans in place with intentions to convert it into some nice piece of property. I was a little concerned after finding out that east of Wildman, 1st, 2nd Street, that there were no plans. And I was just concerned. We talked with staff, and I just want to re-express my concern. I don't want to see a Dollar General or a 7-Eleven or something and will devalue the property, the investments that's going in on this street right now, because people are putting a significant investment in here. And I don't know what the answer is, an amendment, visit. I'd be interested to hear what everybody has to say about that zoning change. I know Mr. Poole expressed his desire to not let it go through last meeting, and I think Mr. Murray had some objections. So I'd like to have some more conversation if we could.
Mr. Chairman.
Discussion, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Murray.
Thank you. You know, I share many of the same concerns, and I have some concerns about the folks in the neighborhood in back on 2nd Street. And so I am therefore going to make a motion that we limit the proposed zoning change to the properties that are on 1st Street only, and not include those properties that abut 2nd Street. And then if there's a second, I have a further comment I'd like to make.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second, I agree.
Then a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Could you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That amendment, that motion is approved. Discussion, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meinzer.
I'm not certain of the methodology, but I wouldn't be opposed to rezoning, you know, up to 2nd Street if we saw a plan up front, some sort of form or idea that we could put in there that would benefit the neighborhood, and you know, a nice housing complex or residential units or something that would blend in and add value to the other investments in that area. So I think we could always revisit the second. They could, you know, apply for a zoning change again if we ever see some plan development or some form-based type zoning.
Additional discussion, Commissioner?
Yeah, Chairman.
Commissioner Poole.
Yes. Does anybody on staff have any idea what the plan is for by the owners of the properties on 1st Street for what to do? We're changing the zoning here, and you can talk about what you don't want to be there, but it doesn't apply. Whatever's in the zoning change is approvable, is done. So I'd just like to ask, since we're about to approve this, what was proposed that we to be done with the properties along 1st Street?
Mr. Volk, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, through you, Commissioner President Brady, to Commissioner Poole. Mr. Waldock, who is the owner of the planned unit development parcels, or a representative of that, he has expressed interest on building some combo of housing with some storage below the housing for people to store their boats in. So it'll be, while we haven't seen any drawings for these, that has been his interest. They would kind of reflect the boathouses that are across the street on the water. But that has been his attention. He also owns the majority of the houses that abut 1st Street. Not all, but a majority of them.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we've done business with him before, and accepting that the general concept that he's proposed, I'm going to support this, even though I realize that he's not locked into doing this, but the description we've been given of what he's planning to do seems to be acceptable, and so I'll support this.
Additional discussion, Commissioners? Mr. Murray, would you restate your you made an amendment to this legislation? Will you restate that amendment?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Do we have a vote on that? I can't remember. But my amendment was to modify the legislation so that the rezoning affected only the properties abutting First Street and excluded the properties there were a small number that abutted Second Street.
We have had a motion, but we've and had a discussion now, but we have not had a vote on it now. I think it's proper now. Unless there's additional discussion, I think we'll vote now on the amendment. Is that not correct? Ms. Spriggs, will you call the roll on the amendment, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That amendment to that piece of legislation is passed. Now I believe it is proper for us to take up that piece of amended legislation. Could I have a motion to take up that piece of amended legislation?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
I make a motion that we move to accept the amended legislation, and I believe this is the second reading, correct?
That is correct.
So we'll move on the second reading and pass it on the second reading, please.
Second.
I'll second that.
Been a motion and a second discussion. No further discussion. Ms. Spriggs, you call roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed as amended. Ms. Spriggs, will you present item number 2, formerly item number 1?
Yes, President Brady. Item number 2 is an ordinance amending Part 11, Planning and Zoning Code, Title 5, Additional Zoning Requirements, Chapter 1157, Flood Damage Reduction of the codified ordinances of the City of Sandusky in the manner and way specifically set forth here and below.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
this is the second reading for this particular piece of legislation, and since we first voted on it, we learned of a quirk in our own codes that required that this be passed in front of the Planning Commission first. And it was really no one's fault. It was just one of these things that slipped between the cracks, but thank goodness Mike Zuloff pointed it out to us. And so it would be my recommendation at this point in time that we table it, if that would be the appropriate motion, so that we can have it evaluated by the Planning Commission.
We have a motion to table. Do I have a second?
I was going to ask a question. Mr. Chairman.
I'm looking for a second on that motion first, Mr. Waddington.
Second.
Where's the second? Yeah.
Motion to table is on the floor. Ms. Spriggs, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That motion is passed, and that piece of legislation is tabled to return another day.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Spriggs, will you present item number 3, please?
He's got to have a hearing.
Yes, Mr. Brady. Item number 3 is an ordinance approving and adopting the Downtown Sandusky Master Plan for the City of Sandusky.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I move that on first reading, we adopt the master plan.
Second.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Spriggs, you call roll on
Mr.
the
Chairman,
motion, please. Commissioner Poole.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole, jump
I
in
want to
there.
say, this is a ambitious plan that we're making a lot of assumptions and beliefs that it's going to do some good things for the community. We discussed it earlier, and as long as we have a robust conversation, expanded before we make any moves of the items that are in, it's something I can support.
Additional discussion, Commissioners. I believe this commission has the opportunity to change the face of this city, perhaps for the next 100 years for the better. This is our opportunity to be bold. I encourage each of you to be bold, to lean forward. Let's take the first step here tonight with our vote of confidence in this plan. They've given us a plan that is just a plan. Nothing is set in concrete. Each one of these parts and pieces of this plan will have to come back to us to approve dollars. This is the first step, perhaps, in a very long journey. I encourage your vote for it. Ms. Spriggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Spriggs, will you present item number 4, please?
Yes, President Brady. Item number 4 is an ordinance approving and adopting the 2021 Public Artwork Plan for the City of Sandusky.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Mr. Waddington, I believe this is a first reading, is it not?
Oh, sorry. Okay, first reading. I'm sorry.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
let me just point out that this is the first reading, so I'll say yes, okay, but we need to be thinking about this over the next 2 weeks. We're buying used lawnmowers, and we've got $40,000 to spend on art trinkets to put around the city. The impact of this is negligible. I would suggest, again, this is an opinion, so I'll go yes going for the first time, but by next week I'll need to think about whether or not I'm going to approve it the second time. Thank you.
Additional discussion, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I don't think Mr. Poole meant to be derisive of the expenditure of these funds. I think he was trying to place it in context. But I would recommend, I realize you're out of town, Mr. Poole, but I would recommend for your reading when you return or online a column that Marcia Carrington had in the Sandusky Register today talking about the importance of art in a community. I didn't used to believe in these things myself either, but I do see that there's an important place for expression. Different people express themselves in different ways, and different people understand art in different ways, and it presents opportunities for lots of conversation. I know that I've had so many conversations with people in Sandusky and my own family about the the installations that we've made, and some are controversial. And, I think it's just great. We end up talking about artwork, and it's a way to focus on some other things that relate to what comes up in the course of those conversations. So, we have, by prior legislation, peeled off a small amount of funding to be dedicated to the arts. It's very, very modest, but I think it's important, as Mr. Webster has said in the past, that these projects that we've started, we need to maintain on a life support basis throughout this terrible pandemic, so that when we return to better times, these will all still be in place. So I support this, and I respect the desire to take a further look at this over the next 2 weeks. I think that's totally appropriate. But I just wanted to express my support for what the Art Commission has done and staff has done to present what I think is a really good plan with a modest budget. Thanks.
Additional discussion, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Poole.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Murray about the importance of art, and he's right. It's about context. I recognize that we're cutting budgets throughout across the city, and it's about consideration of priorities. You didn't cut anything out of this arts budget, and I just think take a good thought about perhaps we could have cut this a little bit and moved a little bit of money and bought a better lawnmower. That actually is pretty significant in terms of its impact on the public. And when we get to that legislation, I can talk further about that. I just recognize that where you're cutting matters. And that's really what I meant. But yes, I fully support the arts.
If I could, through the commission president, I believe the art budget was cut by 80%. Greg can confirm that, but I'm certain that it was cut dramatically from previous funding year levels.
Through you, Commission President, this is based off of the previous year's income tax receipt. So admissions tax increase. So the majority of the funds in this work plan are from actually the 2019 admissions year that we didn't get to utilize due to COVID in 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Volk. Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Ms. Twine.
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer.
Yes.
Mr. Washington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Ms. Twine.
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer.
Yes.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Poole.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed on first reading and will come back to us for a second reading. Ms. Briggs, will you present item number 5, please?
Yes, President Brady. Item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with Pitney Bowes Incorporated of Stamford, Connecticut, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program for postage machine equipment and services, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second discussion. I believe there's a question. From Mrs. Johnson regarding this piece of legislation. Perhaps Mr. Klein could address that issue. Mr. Klein with us tonight?
Yes, I apologize. I thought we were on the mail machine item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We are.
We are on the mail machine item. You're correct.
Oh.
We You're correct. You got
Stewart.
I jumped ahead.
We are on the mail machine, right?
We have a motion and a second on the mail machine issue. Discussion on the mail machine issue, commissioners. Not a lot of interest in the mail machine, I take it.
Stewart's happy.
Ms. Spriggs, you call a roll on the mail machine issue. On the motion,
Absolutely.
please.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance, please.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Stewart's getting a new mail machine. Ms. Spriggs, you present item number 6, the lawnmower issue.
Yes, President Brady. Item number 6 is an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract purchase of a used mower for the grounds maintenance division at public auction at an amount not to exceed $35,000, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioner Singh, we heard this ordinance. How do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, you've had a little additional time to prepare your answer. I hope it's a good one.
Yes, sir. Through you, Mr. President, to Sharon Johnson and the other commissioners, the question that was received, to summarize, it was really how can the money be coming out of issue 8 parks as opposed to just regular general fund capital funds. That's my understanding of the question. And what I would say is that issue 8 was passed, and one of the items that was listed in there was for maintaining and improving streets, sidewalks, and parks. And, you know, when I was looking at this a couple weeks ago as to which fund it would naturally come out of, this looks more to me like a maintenance item used for parks than it does a vehicle, which would be to transport goods and things. But even at that, you know, we have taken vehicles out of issue 8 funds in the past, the street assault trucks, police cruisers, other things like that are used for those departments. So, you know, I really think that account is justified for this type of expenditure. This mower is absolutely critical for our big parks. And if we don't get this mower, we have another one in stock. If anything happens to that, we can't mow parks like Lions Park, Dorn, or any of the other large parks throughout the city. And it's absolutely essential to have this as soon as spring hits and the grass starts growing.
And if I could, through the commission president, just to build on Director Klein, just a reminder that the legislative commitment that was made to the city commission, to the community as part of issue 8, was for around $800,000 to be transferred in infrastructure. We actually have historically transferred up until last year about 1.5 million in issue 8 because revenues have performed greater. So we did, when revenues came in strong post issue 8's passage, we upped the amount for infrastructure while we maintained similar amounts for the housing and economic development because we knew what a priority infrastructure was. So some of those proceeds that might be going on a case-by-case basis to things like the mowers and the maintenance, while we think it's critical and totally appropriate, is also coming on top of an additional amount that we've dedicated on top of what was committed to the community.
Mr. Chairman.
Additional comments or questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
I agree with you, Mr. Klein. I think that issue 8 funding is perfectly appropriate for this kind of a purchase, and I applaud you and your department for having the insight to reach out and attempt to purchase used equipment. I know there's fine used equipment out there. we have an excellent person in Mr. Vaccaro to evaluate that equipment before purchasing it. So my vote is with you and with Mr. Vaccaro to get us a good piece of used equipment at about a 50% discount. That to me is good, sound, common business sense. Ms. Spriggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady.
Mr. Chairman, hold on.
What's that?
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry I missed you, Mr. Poole, but you're a little late on the trigger.
Well, yeah, I thought Mr. Murray was speaking.
Mr. Murray had a question.
That's right. Yeah, you cut out two people, not just one. Okay, but here's my question for Mr. Klein. If you said we have one lawnmower and we're buying another one, am I to assume then that that you run two lawnmowers, correct?
Through the commission president, that is correct. We've had two in the past and we need to have that second one.
Okay, fine. Because when you presented that, it was as though okay, that's fine. Now I need to understand what is Plan B. We're going to an auction where there may not even be a suitable lawnmower. What's Plan B?
Through the commission president to Mr. Poole, in speaking with Mr. Vaccaro, he has been scavenging the Gov Deals and other websites, and he has found several of them on there. Right now, we don't have a Plan B, but if he doesn't find something, we'll have to buy new. And right now, I don't see that as an option based on everything that I've heard from our fleet maintenance department.
What does fleet maintenance have to do with whether or not we buy a new lawnmower?
Through the commission.
In terms of the decision, how does that tie into the decision of whether we buy new or used?
Through the commission president, we rely heavily on Mr. Vaccaro's recommendation, and he is recommending that this one that we purchase is a used vehicle or used mower, so that we can save costs and get other equipment as needed for other divisions as well. I can't speak exactly to why he's recommending used over new, but there are certain situations where some pieces of equipment, some vehicles, some generators and things like that, he does say that he thinks he can find really good deals on used pieces of equipment. And what happens is once he finds that piece of equipment, he consults with our field crews, he consults with Mr. Cromer, and he consults with the users of that that will be using that equipment to make sure that they're on board and making sure that that's exactly what they want. It's in the condition that they would need for longevity as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Murray, I apologize for cutting you off if I did that.
Well, I was having sympathy for you and the couple of troubles that you've had in this meeting. And so I thought, well, I wouldn't press the issue any further. But since you've recognized me, and trust me, I've been there, done the same thing myself. But I wanted to point out that, you know, when we talk about, I mean, the misapprehension here is that when we're spending money on parks and recreation, we're spending it on things such as, you know, seasonal flowers and things that we give out to the children or other people who are participating. And that's all part of it, and it's an important part of it. But the overwhelmingly largest expenditures in any portion of government, perhaps with the exception of Mr. Klein's department when it comes to water, sewer, and roads, but otherwise, the overwhelmingly largest percentage of funding is for personnel and then equipment. So when we talk about Parks and Rec, and when we talk about many other aspects of city government, or frankly, any other service entity, the salaries and the equipment really is what gobbles it all up. So I just want to put that in some context. That's all. Thanks.
Additional discussion, commissioners. Ms. Briggs, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yeah, yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present item number 7, please.
Yes, President Brady. Item number 7 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed 2021 wastewater treatment plant digester number 1 cleanout project, approving the specifications and engineer's estimate of cost thereof, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto.
Commissioners, you have heard the first reading of this ordinance. How do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the first reading.
Second.
Second.
Been a motion and there's been a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I have to say sludge cake is the greatest euphemism of all time.
Insightful, Mr. Murray, very insightful. Additional discussion, Commissioners. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on this motion, please?
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
That concludes our, that resolution is passed on first reading only. It'll come back for a second reading. That concludes our regular agenda, and we'll turn to our city manager for his presentation.
What I might
Mr.
just
Webster, you have muted your microphone.
That was a test to see if anyone was actually listening to me or not. So now I know that at least Commission President Brady is.
1 out of 6 isn't bad.
So I thank the commission, audience, and staff. I'll start with police. We want to thank Detective Ken Nixon for his service. He retired from the police department on this past Friday after serving the city for 26 years and for a long time as a detective. We're very grateful for your dedication to the community. Congratulations and enjoy your retirement. Also, Jose Diaz Torres and Tracy Susana, a retired sergeant, were both sworn in as reserve police officers on February 9th. And Nicholas Blackford, previously a reserve, is scheduled to be sworn in as a full-time officer on February 25th. For the fire department, we'd like to welcome our newest firefighter, Daniel Eiffel, who started on February 21st. Daniel comes from Lakewood, Ohio, and has his firefighter 1 and 2 EMT qualifications. He's currently enrolled in paramedic school and will graduate in December of this year. For Public Works, we want to give a very special thanks to all of the field crews who have been working around the clock to keep our streets, sidewalks, parks, and bike path clear of snow throughout the past several weeks, as well as to all property owners and residents who have continued to keep their sidewalks and curb ramps clear of snow and ice. Please remember to do whatever you can to have your sidewalks cleared within the first 4 hours of daylight following or during snow events. And I do just want to pause there for a second because this was probably the heaviest snow timing-wise that we've had in the nearly 7 years that I have been city manager of Sandusky, and it came in the year where we've had the most turbulence and challenges due to the pandemic, and probably even more responsibility put onto the shoulders of those who were here to work on the snow, because we have created expectations for not only the streets,
but a higher expectations for the clearing of sidewalks and a higher expectations for the clearing of the Sandusky Bay pathway. And to see how these individuals really did step up and rally, and no response to a storm like that is perfect. But to the point, the community did their part, our staff did their part, and it was just something that made me really, really proud from the top to the bottom of the organization and the community. And I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for what was a really tough assignment, and one that you usually hear more complaints about than compliments. So well done to everyone involved in that. In addition to that, unfortunately, staff was informed that the city will not be awarded a grant application for the landing through the ODOT safety program. Our understanding is that ODOT only awarded $20 million this year, which was due to the budget cuts that they had to take on. It was a $100 million program last year because of the funding shortfalls. And most of the funding went to projects that were able to demonstrate serious injuries and fatalities. But we're going to keep looking for opportunities. Fortunately, as you remember, we did get a $750,000 grant from the state capital budget, and we'll continue to find resources for this project. And I do think that once state funding levels return, the Pathway and Landing Park will continue to be a very competitive project. Also, the greenhouse is now accepting palm and fern reservations for Good Friday and for Easter Sunday. You can contact them at their website or at 419-627-5829 to place an order. And shoreline stabilization work on the fingers of Shoreline Park was completed on February 12th. Work at the Transient Marina began on February 17th and should be completed today or tomorrow. In addition to that, for the planning department, the next Arts and Culture Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 16th at 5:15. Landmark is scheduled for Wednesday, March 17th at 5 p.m. Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled for March 18th at 4:30, and Planning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, February 24th at 5 p.m. All of those meetings are virtual. For Sandusky Transit, as part of STS's partnership with NeoRide and the FTA IMI grant, NeoRide and Cleveland State are currently conducting a rider survey to elicit feedback about EasyFare, our mobile ticketing app. This project involves 11 total transit agencies in Ohio and is open until March 1st, and the first 200 respondents earn STS bus passes. More information about the project is available at www.neoride.org/IMIGRANT. Also for STS, they submitted a master letter of intent to ODOT on February 22nd, indicating an intent to apply for ODOT and FTA funds for the upcoming year. The application for funding is due on April 30th, 2021. I know we've had questions because it's been announced as part of some of the state's own budget challenges that they're looking to cut back on transit funding statewide, which we are opposed to. Ohio is already one of the lowest states on a per capita basis in the country, particularly for urbanized states, for its funding of transit. This fund is a capital fund that we apply to match for grants to purchase budgets and to make other capital improvements. Tom Horseman, the STS manager, is participating, I believe, tomorrow. He let myself and Director Holliday know, and we'll hopefully have more detailed information about where that stands. But we urge the commissioners and staff is doing whatever advocacy it can do to hopefully mitigate the impact that those cuts will have on public transportation, which is really just passing the cost of the budget down to those who need resources the most in a very regressive way. And we hope that the state will consider and look for other opportunities to balance the budget. For recreation, the warming shelter at New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church remained open until the morning of Sunday, February 21st. The shelter was open for 2 straight weeks, thanks to the church, community support, and a list of volunteers that I'm going to read. Brittany Benedict, Dora Grant, Lance Nickister, Randy Coleman, Daniel Wallenslegal, Valerie Whitaker, Daniel Butler, Anthony Hendrickson, Cheryl Hendrickson, Amanda Garman, Ryan Garman, Dawn Randall Black, Kiana Williamson, Shannon Williamson, Terry Kirk, Tom Migrant, Teresa Jenkins, Kurt Jenkins, Alexa Jones, Sarah Kea, and Lynn Amison. We are very grateful for those who stepped up and volunteered during what are difficult times with COVID and really bad weather. And it was a testament to what a caring community Sandusky really is. And we're grateful for those on staff, on the commission, and partners that made that possible. And then finally, we have issued 2 new requests for proposals for the purchase of a mobile stage and a portable LED movie screen. These purchases are being made possible through private donors. More information and legislation and an announcement on those donors as part of a larger program that we're excited to talk about will come as soon as possible to the City Commission, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any commission members have offline. That concludes my report for this evening. I'm happy to answer questions or take comments.
Commissioners, questions for the city manager?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Harris.
I don't necessarily have any comments or questions. However, I just wanted to take a moment just to let my fellow commissioners and staff, as well as those listening, that two former Sandusky, or I should say Sandusky alum, Eldashawn Nix and Steve Moore, over the years, they've actually been the host of many holiday events and giveaways. But this year, on April 10th, Saturday, April 10th, they decided to honor and recognize many of our heroes, or otherwise known as essential workers, with an event at Sandusky High called Essentials Workers Night Out. And again, that'll be held on April 10th, and that'll be from 6 to 9 p.m. And this event will feature live performances, comedians, paint and party, dinner, raffle prizes, special guests, and much more. And a lot of the RSVPs will be available March 1st. So if you're interested and would like more information, feel free to contact me, and I can put you in contact with them and or just reach out to them directly. So.
Questions for the city manager? If there are none, we will move to items of old business, commissioners. Any items of old business?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waddington.
About an hour ago, I tried to get through to ask on which would be item 2 tonight. That if that went back to planning, and then I guess tabled it, but the public hearing, does that need a 30-day notice? If we have a public hearing on item 1, which is actually item 2, I was going to ask that when we were having a discussion on, but I didn't get through. Maybe the law director would know.
Well,
Commissioner, through you, President Brady, to Commissioner Waddington, are you asking if it needs to have a second public hearing?
Yeah, if this is, if it had to go back to planning, would we have to have a public hearing or a 30-day notice for that to pass it at the commission table? Does that have to go out for?
After the planning commission hears the ordinance, whatever their recommendation, we would start over with the city commission. So we'll follow the steps, which I believe in this would require a hearing and then 2 readings, since it is a change to these.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. I just want to get that straight, so because I was sitting there thinking, wait, this has to come back some part. Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be coming back in the fall.
Okay. Thank you.
additional items of old business, commissioners? Any items of new business, commissioners? I would ask for a motion to set a public hearing for the CDGB substantial amendment for March the 8th. I need a motion for the substantial CDGB substantial amendment for March the 8th.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Briggs, you call a roll on the motion, please.
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That public hearing is set for March the 8th. Any additional items of new business, commissioners? Ms. Briggs, are there any communications from residents regarding city business to be read?
President Brady, I don't have any items to read.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.